What's up, Diablo 4 players? So this is a very important video. You need to do this before it's too late. And by too late, I mean at the start of the next season. So starting right off, there's an important Twitter post that was posted recently that talks about legacy items. So legacy items are going to be frozen in their last state at the beginning of Season 4 Loot Reborn. So basically, your items and the current state will actually get frozen. You cannot do any masterworking on the item. You cannot temper the old items. So it says that they're still usable, but they cannot be modified and will be marked as such. So these are going to be frozen in time, so to speak. And you can get items to have stats that are so crazy good that you will not be able to actually roll them again. Unless we get, let's say, World Tier 5 and a higher item power. For the most part, these will actually be better than the items that you can potentially get in Season 4 for some categories. It's not every single slot, but I'll go ahead and get into that in a moment here. But I also want to mention that this is very important for any of you guys that are playing on Eternal, is that there is a stash tab over here, and all of these items will be deleted. So make sure you take mostly the Uber Uniques, that's the most important thing. But there are a few other modifiers that you will never be able to get in the game because they're being deleted out of the game with the new Loot Reborn season. So you have to get these out before the season starts. It says right here, when the new season starts, any items left here will be lost. So you will permanently lose these items, so make sure you clean those out. Again, this is mainly for the Uber Uniques, but there are certain items that you absolutely want to go ahead and keep. And I'm going to go ahead and get into that in a second here. So there are some changes in Season 4. I'm going to go ahead and go over those really briefly, but you need to make sure you take some of the items out because you cannot get damage reduction on a lot of pieces of gear that you could still get right now at the time of me making this video, and this is going to be changing in Season 4. So starting right off, the armor cap is actually being changed to 9/230. So after you get that, that'll give you 85% damage reduction. You don't need to get any more. But I mentioned before that you need to do this now before it's basically lost forever. You're not going to be able to get this again unless they do another rework on the itemization, which I don't know when that's going to happen. So starting right off, the most important thing is you need to try to look at any pieces of gear. This can also be your yellow pieces of items. But remember, because they're saying you can't modify these, you might as well go ahead and throw an aspect on it as well. You can see over here we happen to have Juggernauts. But Juggernaut's technically is getting like a massive number change too, so I'm not sure if we can just imprint over the same one, or if that means we cannot modify the items anymore. But regardless of what's going to be happening, this one over here, this armor, is actually going to be a godly piece of armor, with the exception of maybe some Uber Uniques for some certain builds. And I'll get into that in a second. So the items that you absolutely want to save, otherwise they're going to be lost out forever, is getting what's called the damage reduction. So damage reduction is going to be considered, and they've said this multiple times, a premium stat. So what they mean by that is that damage reduction that you're getting in the game, they're trying to rework some of the itemization in the game, and damage reduction is kind of too powerful of a stat to go ahead and have in the game. So if you have any items, again, if it's already yellow, make sure you convert it to a legendary, because they're saying it's going to basically freeze in time and you can't modify it. So modify these now, and what you're trying to get is damage reduction. So that's damage reduction from close, damage reduction from distance. If you have any of these pieces of gear, get these, buy these, trade, sell these on different, like, websites. I'm talking about not real money, but, obviously there's trade websites for gold, because gold is not really an important stat. You can get gold again, but you will never be able to get damage reduction on rolls for the most part, with the exception of, like, Harlequin Crest has a mod, but that's an Uber Unique. The brand new Tyrael's Might, this is another Uber Unique that will have this damage reduction stat. So try to get these ASAP right now. There is another mod technically on a lot of different builds, and I'll get into that kind of in a second. But for the rogue, there's damage reduction from poison enemies, or let's say burning or bleeding. There is some sort of stat condition. This damage reduction, again, you will never be able to get this again on a lot of pieces of gear. So it's usually in the chest department where this matters the most, because in pants, it does matter. Like, you could still get all those, and I'll get into that in a second. But you specifically want to make sure on the chest piece for most builds, there's just too much damage reduction that you'd be losing out on if you really want to be a min-maxer. Because remember, we're not getting any seasonal power, so there will be a lot of players on the Eternal Realm basically having these crazy amount of stats on gear that, again, you can't get again. For the pants, though, Tibalt's Will is usually going to be best in slot for a lot of builds, but if you want that extra survivability, this is the way to go. And why is this whole damage reduction as well as percent to maximum to all resistance so good. Now, max res doesn't really roll on things. There's like Tassus of the Dawning Sky, which is like a pretty bad item overall. But to explain why resistances, as well as getting that armor cap, is so important, which is now 85% over here, and you're going to reach it by, again, getting the new number, which is 9,230, which used to be like 16,000 for high tier pit or something like that. But all you need is 9,230, and you're done with armor. And to kind of briefly explain this, I want to go over this really quick, but I feel like it is kind of important for the video. Now, this is a video by Engineering Eternity. This applies to basically all action RPGs, though. So how this is shown off, I'm just showing this thing off, but I'll link it down below in case anyone wants to watch the full video. Basically, what it comes down to is if you take 1,000 fire damage, you have 75 fire resistance, which is normal in like Diablo. That's the maximum. But there is also +2 maximum resistances. So if you have 75 fire res, you take 1,000 damage, you get actually 250 damage taken. Now, if you go up just 1%, you actually take 240 damage. That extra 1% is actually giving you way more value per point, and this applies if you go even higher. The higher that you go, and you go to 85 in Diablo 4, you're going to be taking less and less damage, which, yeah, that makes sense. But you get more value per point if it's registered this way. And originally I was going to go ahead and include this like thing over here, which someone made over on Reddit, which was a really good thing. And basically you can input your HP, but there's a lot of like conditional things. And I don't really want to get into it to make this video way too long, but basically you want damage reduction in the game. It's a very powerful stat. But make sure that you check here for any yellow or legendary items that would actually meet these requirements. Another thing to mention is that if you still think about, well, okay, I'm just going to play it on the seasons, and aren't I going to be getting these greater affixes? Sure, but there are certain items, like, for example, this is my Melted Heart of Selig. The old one used to roll with core skill damage, but the new one actually changes this, like, damage while healthy over here. You can see that this one over here, that stays the same. However, the +2 core skills and all stats did get upgraded. Now, if you have what's called a legacy item, it'll still have the older stats. It won't actually change. Sometimes, and I say sometimes, which is really weird because I had the older Ring of the Starless Skies, but this actually did get changed. So it's kind of up in the air on how they're going to be doing things, because there are legacy items that remain legacy items, but there was also older items that you would get that they would just go ahead and change. So I cannot confirm on every single unique or uber unique if they will just instantly retroactively change. So keep in mind, if there's something that's like a rare stat that is being modified, like Eagle Horn and a lot of other uniques are being changed, and you want the old stat, go ahead and grab it, because the newer ones may not have the newer stat. When it basically drops, you'll get the newer one, obviously, because it's a brand new one. But basically, when you roll over to the seasonal change, even though they said that it's going to be freezing, it's not always 100% true. I mean, you can see it, even with my Melted Heart of Slig, you can see over here, this is like the old one, and when we got the update, it did not change. So again, that is something to consider as well, which is pretty important. But the last thing over here that I do want to go and mention, and this is probably one of the most important parts of this video, but this is basically what you want to look out for rolls that cannot roll anymore. Now, this is going to be class dependent, but this over here is an example for Rogue, but there are going to be other ones. So I mentioned before, damage reduction on your chest piece. This is like so incredibly godly. Now, depending on the class, there might be damage reduction from bleeding or burning enemies. That's important to get depending on your class. Now, as far as certain mods, like for example, on cooldown reduction for very specific skills that cannot roll again, trap cooldown reduction does not roll in the next season, and that is very important to consider. There's another thing for a lot of builds that would give you some sort of multiplier, or per X amount of energy spent, you would get some sort of a massive bonus, right? So maximum energy does not actually roll anymore, with the exception of very specific things. But if you want to have maximum energy, and this is actually something that enables or disables a crazy build with Rogue, with the Beastfall Boots as well as Banished Swords Talisman, maximum energy can no longer roll on rings, basically your stat of your resource. That doesn't roll anymore. Now, as far as weapon goes, I'm going to be honest, most of the weapons you could kind of skip out on, and the reason why is because you lose out on the ability to temper the item and also masterwork the item. Weapons really can't be good in the legacy department for the most part. There may be some exception for some crazy ability, but the weapons don't matter. Those are the stats that you want to try to look out for, but I felt like this video was very important to mention for the community, because you have a limited time to not only take out your items, otherwise they're going to be deleted, or roll and get that damage reduction on all of the pieces of gear for whatever build that you're playing. But anyways, that's going to wrap things up. Hope this video helped you guys out. If it did, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe, turn the bell so you don't miss out on more Diablo important videos and guides. Anyways, take care. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.